everybody, Kane541204 here, or as I like to be known as, Harley D. Stacy, and welcome back to Kain'sCorner. Now, this may seem a little bit odd or a little bit rambunctious, and I'm sure you guys have read the title. I am going to start reviewing the Dungeons & Dragons books, primarily because I want to start talking about the mechanics and start talking about different aspects of D&D that I like, dislike, that kind of thing. And of course, you can't make a review of D&D books until you go with the first one, the Player's Handbook. Now, the Player's Handbook, in my personal opinion, I have read that book approximately 1,000 times that I've kept count. Hydrate. But, with that being said, I may have read this book a bunch of times, but there's a lot of things in it that I don't like. If that makes sense. And we will get to that. But, what is Dungeons & Dragons, and why am I talking about the Player's Handbook? Well, primarily because I think there's a lot of really good books out there for the D&D series and for the game itself, but obviously I can't go talking about them without talking about the first one. So, we're going to talk about the first one. I'm going to go through it, and there's going to be times where I'm looking down and I'm just reading the book. But that is to kind of give you an idea of what you're working with. I may also put up here, like, some images to kind of give you an idea, like some pages and stuff out of the book. But, to start us off, I wanted to talk about how the game in and of itself kind of introduces you into the game. Primarily, it uses a lot of text to start you off. It does a lot of introductory stuff about what the game is, what you do, how to use the book, obviously, and what different dice do, advantage, disadvantage, stuff like that. Personally, I think the opener of the book is fine. It gives you a decent idea of what the mechanics are of the game. It tells you what advantage, disadvantage is, what each dice does. It essentially gives you an idea of what to expect going forward as you read the book. It then jumps into creating a character. And I personally, formatting-wise, I personally do not think this is a good place to put it. Personally, anyway. Going to the table of contents. Personally, I think that the other rules of the game should be here after the introduction. I personally believe that the other rules for things like combat, adventuring, RPGing, role-playing, I think that stuff should be after the introduction, just to kind of give you a light of what you're about to jump into. So it jumps straight into creating your character. And you have, I believe, 6 options. So, let's look. 1, 2, 3. So it gives you 9 options. Okay. Not a bad little chunk to start you off. So you have Dwarf, Elf, Halfling, Human, Dragonborn, Gnome, Half-Elf, Half-Orc, and the Tiefling. Controversial opinion. I think that the Half-Orc and the Dragonborn are lame. I think the Half-Orc is hardly ever used, and 9 times out of 10 when it is used, most of its abilities kind of get forgotten. And the Half-Orc is kind of one build. You build it either to be a strength character, or you build it to be a cut against the grain of what an orc is. Personally, I think the half-orc shouldn't even be a racial option. Just because of the fact that there is that stigma of orcs out there that, all orcs are evil, and then you have half-orcs who, I believe specifically in their description, it tells you that these guys were not born proper, as in they were not, born in an actual family. Where is it? Just so I'm not, stereotyping. Let's see. Yeah, it gives you this idea that the half-orcs are this tribe that they stick with. And personally, I don't like the fact that it kind of just shoehorns you into this idea that you have to kind of stick to a tribe. I mean, obviously, as a role player, you could decide that's just not a part of your build. But for a lot of new players, they'll read it and go, oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're right. But the problem is also you have the fact that there's going to be a lot of people out there who build their character with the mentality of, oh, now, this character is now just here. With no rhyme or reason of how he got there. So it's kind of sad to say, but there's hardly anything that's going to be there. So, what do you do about that? Honestly, as a DM, I ignore... 9 times out of 10, I just ignore half-orcs in general. That's not to say I don't let my players, bring a half-orc, or when they do, I ignore them. It's more along the lines of when players play half-orcs, they get bored really fast. They're like, I'm kind of like this one-note character. I'm either being spit on because I'm an orc, or I'm being treated harshly by other orcs. And only one of those clans I can actually just go out and kill. And it doesn't feel right, personally, as a DM, to just say, well, there's going to be problems being a half-orc, because if you're trying to build a dynamic world, that's going to be your first trapping. Who's going to be racist against each other? Because let's be honest, that's going to be a part of the damn world that you're playing in. Unless it's not, in which case, you're playing in a utopia society, which, good for you. I do it too. I actually do not play a lot of campaigns when racism is a matter. The only time I ever do that is if I'm building a campaign from scratch and I have to think about things like that, because those are just part of the world, and I don't like to go halfway. I like to express everything. And it's cool to see a player take on that responsibility by you saying, hey, you're going to be shown, you're going to be shown a little bit of racism. You're going to be shown a little discrimination. Are you okay with that? And they go, yeah. I want to show them that I'm different. And that's great. It's perfect. It's beautiful. But if you're playing a half-orc, you're not really getting anywhere. The half-orc is just... it's all over the place. As for the Dragonborn, I think the Dragonborn are stupid. I think they're lame. Because the Dragonborn are just humanoids that happen to look like dragons. And at first I thought that the Dragonborns were born from dragons. Maybe like younger dragon whelps. But no, actually, it's literally the birth of a Dragonborn, almost like a human. And that feels weird. That feels very wrong. Especially considering dragons, their kin are birthed from eggs. It's also one of the biggest reasons why the stereotypical joke with the bard, I seduce the dragon gets pregnant, is fucked all over the place, because dragons lay eggs. If the bard fucked the dragon, I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be any kids around because of it. Just on a technical standpoint. Never mind looking into the frickin' book that's literally about that shit. Because I don't own it, thank God. But, it's the preamble that everybody goes over, and it's like, that's not right. Dragon etymology is not that cut and dry. It's literally they lay their kins from eggs. Now, again, the Dragonborns could be born that way, but the book doesn't really describe it that well. It doesn't really go into it, and it's primarily because, obviously, the book can't go into mating rituals of dragons. Obviously, right? It can't go into the mating habits of dragons. It has to talk about the different aspects of what the Dragonborn can do. And I think its breath weapon is really weak. I don't like the fact that it gives you strength and charisma, because it's like, pick a fucking lane. Honestly, pick a lane. Either you're going to be a strength build, or you're going to be a charisma spellcaster based build. You're not going into either one right down the middle. I'm sorry. It's not happening. Just because of how the damn game is built. You're either going to go into the strength, or you're going to go into the charisma, and honestly, 9 times out of 10, I see people just go into the strength and leave it be. If they go into the spellcasting range, they dump charisma and use, wisdom. I have seen so many clerics, wizards, and druids of freaking Dragonborns more than I have seen sorcerers, warlocks, or paladins. And I'll be perfectly honest, I think a paladin Dragonborn is the best you're gonna get of walking right down that line. Specifically because of the fact that as a paladin, you are 9 times out of 10 swinging a melee weapon which requires your strength. Which, that makes sense. I think that's partially why in the Paladin section they have a picture of a frickin' Dragonborn Paladin. Give me a minute. You'd think I'd have this tabbed out. Half-orc Paladin. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make the half-orc a Paladin. Well, why not? I don't know. I guess they don't. But that would be the most, that'd be the easiest middle of the road that you'd get. You want the most balanced? Dragonborn Paladin. And to everybody who's going to be screaming in the comment sections, well, what about Fizban's Treasury of Dragonborns? Or Treasury of Dragons? I will say wait for me to review that book, because I have a lot of good things to say about it. But, other than that, I think it's fine. It gives you a decent idea of what each race is. Like the Dwarves, it gives a little bit of a description of its thoughts on the other races. Its thoughts on Elves, humans, gnomes. Gnomes, it actually goes into how they are related to the Dwarves. So, it gives you a little bit of knowledge what to do when you're building your characters. Great. Personally, I think the system for your characters is kind of screwed. Give me a minute. There we go. Get that stress off that damn cord. But as I said, hold on, we'll wait a minute. Where was I? Oh yeah. I think that the other races are fine. Tieflings are okay. Again, I kind of go towards the same argument I make with half-orcs with the Tieflings. The only difference, honestly, between the two is the fact that the Tiefling is just a lot more... a lot more centered around the spellcasting aspect. Like, they are a lot better at spellcasting. In fact, they get spells as they level up, no matter what class they are. Like, they get Hellish Rebuke, Darkness, and they get that stuff naturally. So, obviously, they're going to be a little bit more towards the spellcasting aspect, because they're like, oh, I get spells naturally, why wouldn't I? So, normally, if you're a new player, you don't play a Tiefling, you don't play a Half-Orc, and you definitely don't play a Dragonborn. 9 times out of 10, if you're a new player, you're playing one of 3 races. You're either playing a Dwarf, you're playing a Human, or you're playing an Elf. I like the fact that some of the races have different archetypes, or different sub-races that they can be. Like, the gnomes can be hill gnomes or forest gnomes. Oh, I'm thinking of dwarves. Dwarves can be the forest or the mountains. Elves get like 4 subclasses. They can be a wood elf, high elf, drow, and one other, and I can't remember it. But they get a bunch of sub-races. And that's partially why you're playing mostly the elf, is because you have most of the stuff tweaked out already. So, for this section, it's alright. You know, it's not offensive. It gets the job done. It gives you 9 options to play with. After you've played a little bit, then maybe you dip your toes into the other races. But like I said, 9 times out of 10, if you're a new player, you see the dwarves, the humans, or the elves, and you're like, oh, I know what those guys are. I'll play them. Because it actually kind of treats them in 5th edition, kind of like J.R.R. Tolkien's humans, elves, dwarves, and hobbits. You know, halflings are basically hobbits. And the book doesn't really hype that fact. It honestly just kind of goes, yeah, this is what they do. They live in little holes in the ground. So, it is one thing. Then we go into classes. Whoo boy, this is where we're going to be here for a minute. So, classes, in order, we got Bard, Barbarian, oh, hold on, flip that. Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. I am going to go in order of what I think of each of these classes. Just out of the player's handbook. This is with no other expansions, no other anything of that. Just my thoughts on the base classes. Okay. Starting out, Barbarian. I think the Barbarian is the most overused class in D&D. Just because of the fact that the thing literally is almost impossible to kill. A Barbarian is extremely hard to kill because of the fact that it has a rage that it gets super early on. It gets it at level 1. So at first level, it gets a rage. And the rage ability essentially sets it up to where it takes half damage from any physical attack. So any, like, claw or anything that's bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, which is like getting hit with a sword, getting hit with a mallet, getting stabbed, the damn thing only takes half the damage. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna do 6 points of damage to you. Halved to 3. Not nearly as impressive. And trust me, that'll take the wind out of your sails as a DM too, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna swing at you. He hits, the dragon does 26 points of piercing damage as it bites you. And the Barbarian goes, oh, it only did 25. That being said, the Barbarian is one of the more fun classes to play. Just because of the fact that you do get to knock off half the damage that you take in combat. It means that in combat, you are the guy everybody hides behind. You walk in to the room of the BBEG, and you've got your axe at the ready, you're raging, and he goes up to attack you, and everybody else is behind you because you're the guy who can block just about any attack. So, it doesn't help either. The Barbarian is one of the funner classes to play as a player. Plus, there is an archetype for it that lets it take half damage from everything but psychic damage. And psychic damage, 9 times out of 10, is going to do the most damage to a Barbarian anyway. There's a reason why there's a joke around that says, don't let the Barbarian meet the Mind Flayer. It's because the Mind Flayer will eat its brain. Not a lot of nutrition there, but okay. Next is the Bard. The Bard is one of the funnest classes to play, period. It is one of my favorites. It is my second favorite class to play of all time. Because, as a Bard, you essentially are a skill monkey. It does not matter how you build him. It does not matter how you build them. No matter which archetype you take, you are a skill monkey. You can do just about anything. And the DM really can't argue against it, because Jack of all trades literally gives you half of your proficiency to all your skills. And I believe you get that pretty early on at like level 5. I think. I have the book in front of me, but I don't want to spend all of it reading. Besides, if I'm wrong, it gives you something to comment about. But the Bard is one of the funner classes to play. The problem with the Bard is everybody makes fun of them. They are a charisma-based caster, which means 9 times out of 10, people believe that they are going to be able to seduce their way out of anything. And 9 times out of 10, they're right, because everybody likes to make the meme character. They like to make the character who can charm his way out of anything. They like to play the character who's, you know, really good in fucking bed. And fucking in bed. But, personally, I don't like that playstyle as a barbarian. Or, not as a barbarian. I mean, the Barbarian probably does some smashing too, but that's not the point. Oh god, that was bad. That was a bad joke. We're keeping it in. But the Bard is so much more than just the jokes. The Bard can actually be one of the more serious characters in the game, because he understands what's going on the most. I didn't do this for the Barbarian, but I'm going to do it for the Bard. If I had to recommend seeing a specific kind of Bard, I would recommend 2, actually. I would recommend from Critical Role, obviously, I would recommend Scanlan. Just watching Scanlan and how he evolves beyond the joke character. Personally, it's my favorite arc of the entirety of Campaign 1 of Critical Role. And it's personally one of my favorite things to see, is Scanlan's change from that memey joke character who seduces everything to becoming an actual person. Then we have my second favorite Bard that I've ever seen played online, and that is played by Nate Wants to Battle, and it's Paladin. Paladin Seppa from Dice Camera Action. I don't care what anybody says, Dice Camera Action is my second favorite series to watch when it comes to D&D, and I'm so sad to see it gone. But Paladin Seppa was my favorite Bard until I watched Critical Role. And the reason behind that is because Paladin actually has a different aspect of the Bard that I like. It's this tortured... It's essentially showing the... It's essentially showing the downward slope of a rock star. It's showing a rock star that's peaked and is slowly just hitting bottom of the barrel. And it's really interesting to watch because Paladin actually goes from bottoming out to actually kind of peaking again. You know, not a lot of rock stars do that. And it's great to see. And personally, that's the kind of bard that I've always admired, is a character who's playing this idea that he is something other than just what he represents. He's not just a music player. He's also a person. And that's part of the reason why I like Scanlan so much. So, next is the Cleric. The Cleric, this one's going to take a minute, because honestly, I haven't had a lot of experience with the Cleric. And that's really weird. I have only ever played, I'm being serious here, I've only ever played with 3. One was in my first ever campaign that I ever played, which is right here in a book form, and Varus is in that book. The second one that I ever played with was in my second favorite campaign that I've ever ran, and she was only there for a little while. And then the third Cleric I've actually played with was in another game that was being ran by a guy who had 2 characters. He was running with Cleric and her dad, Ticonderoga. So, what I have seen of the Cleric, I think the Cleric is fine. I think the player's handbook is fine in terms of what the Cleric can do, but every time I've read it, it's always kind of just not really what I want to do. I don't really want to play a Cleric when I look at it. Looking at it, I just don't want to. I just want to whatever. Because War Magic's fine. War Magic's great, but 9 times out of 10, you're playing a Cleric and you're playing the Life Domain. Because that's what everybody tells you you have to play, which personally, I'm not a fan of. The Life Domain is boring. It's really good at heals, but it's boring. And everybody plays it. Everybody plays it. And personally, I just don't want to. I don't want to play that kind of Cleric. If I'm going to play a Cleric, I'm going to play a War Domain, because I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be great playing a Cleric who actually just does damage and attacks, instead of just being, oh, I heal you. You know, I've seen Critical Role, obviously, I talk about it a lot. I think in that show, Pike Trickfoot's an okay Cleric. I'll say it, but I will also say this as a hot take: I don't like Pike, because she's boring. And she is the War Domain Cleric, but she's boring. And it's because we don't really see a lot of her. That's nothing to do with Ashley Johnson. It's merely the fact that we don't really get to see her a lot. And when we do get to see her, she's playing Mother for all of Vox Machina. She's basically playing the, we need to be smart about what we're doing here. Yeah. Especially considering that family needs a fucking mother. Pike's great for that, but it's the fact that she's rather boring about it. And again, it's nothing to do with Ashley Johnson. She did really well with Pike. But what you're waiting for is me to talk about Caduceus and Jester. I don't like Jester. Or I should say, I don't like early game Jester. So, at the beginning of Campaign 1, or not Campaign 1, but at the end of Campaign 1, a lot of speculation was going out about what kind of character that Laura and Travis were going to make. And Laura went and did her one-shot, and she played Jester. And she was like, I had a lot of fun playing Jester. I want to play her again. And then Travis made Ford. Everybody knew that Travis is not a fan of romancing in Dungeons & Dragons. We know this as a fact. Travis has gone on record multiple times claiming he did not like the idea of romancing any of his characters. So what did Laura do? She flat out said, no, we're doing this. and built a character that was trying to woo Ford, and essentially went about it the wrong way. Personally, I am aware that Travis and Laura are married. I am aware that they are in a relationship. They have a kid. Congratulations to them. But it was the fact that Laura built a character early on that was actually kind of creepy. Like, if you watch those early game episodes, Jester's really creepy towards Ford. Like, stalkerish levels of creepy, and that's not okay. Now, about halfway through the series, I began to like her when she stopped forcing it. When Ford called her out on it and told her flat out, hey, this is not okay, I don't like it, and Jester actually stopped and started to actually develop into a more than just carving dicks on the side of a frickin' altar, I actually started to like her character, but I don't like her as a cleric. She is a cleric of the Trickster domain. Personally, she should have been a rogue. Personally, I think she should have been a rogue, because of the fact that she played Jester so devilishly. But once she started developing her own personality outside of that, it was like, oh, yeah, no, Jester's a cleric. Makes sense. Caduceus Clay. When it comes to videos and watching them online, when it comes to D&D online, Caduceus, I fucking love you, man. I love Taliesin Jaffe. 9 out of fucking 10, I watch Taliesin's characters, and I cannot help but laugh, cry, or both at the same time. I did it with Percy, I did it with Mollymock, and I did it with Caduceus. I have yet to see... Ooh, sorry. I have yet to see it with Ashton. But if nothing else, I'm glad to take the frickin' break. But, as a cleric, he's great. He is, I believe, he is the death domain of the clerics. Sorry about this, by the way. I have to keep hydrating. But, Caduceus is great. I love how Taliesin plays his characters. A lot of people are going to be going, this is just a big old critical role love letter, and it's like, yeah, a little bit. Because a lot of my good examples are from Critical Role, and those that are seeing my videos probably have seen Critical Role. If you haven't seen Critical Role, go watch it. It's not a bad show. It's actually really good with a lot of really talented voice actors. Chances are, if you've watched anime, you know a good chunk of them. And a lot of them are really good. So, yeah, moving on. Druid. I don't like the Druid. I do not like the Druid in the player's handbook. Let me discern that now. I do not like the Druid in the player's handbook. I think the Druid in the player's handbook is lazy. And I also think it's really, really lame. It's really, really boring. Because you play the Druid. First of all, it gives you 2 archetypes to work with. Moon and land. Circle of the moon, transform into things. Circle of the land, you get powers based off of the land that you choose. One lets you get powers from the earth, and the other lets you transform into dragons. The player's handbook Druid is boring, because you are 9 times out of 10 going Circle of the Moon. It does not matter, because you look at it and it's like, oh, our transformation for the Druid's kind of bad. Because at first it's limited to a certain number of, like, for your experience. If you're at this level, you can only do this with creatures with challenge rating like a third of your level. If you go Circle of the Moon, it literally goes, okay, now you can just transform into things that are half your level in challenge rating. You're at level 4? Great, you can transform into anything that's level 2, as long as it's a creature. Great! I'll turn into a goldfish. Speaking of goldfishes, let's talk about examples of druids. Keyleth from the Vox Machina, Critical Role, Campaign 1. Not my favorite druid. In fact, I do not have a favorite druid in media because they're playing it based off the player's handbook. It's 1 of 2 characters. You're either playing the freaking character that transforms into things, or you're doing stuff based off of the land you're in. And neither one is that interesting. The problem with the druid, I think, is the fact that it's really just, it comes down to, do you want to be useful in combat or not? Do you want to be good in roleplay situations or not? Make your choice. As a new player, you're obviously going to go with the one that lets you be better at combat, because you don't really know much of anything else. And role-playing around the table is scary. So 9 times out of 10, you're just like, no, I want to be good at combat. I want to turn into a cheetah and rip the throats of my enemies out. I want to turn into a dire wolf and attack them. At level 20, I want to become a dragon. You can do that at level 20. You can become a dragon, and you can become a dragon indefinitely. You know, that's the other issue I have with the druids. Their level 20 ability is busted. It essentially lets them wild shape into anything they want, and they can cast spells. And they get the hit points from the creature that they become. And when they drop to 0 hit points, they can literally just do it again. And they keep their original hit points. The druid's level 20 ability, yes, they earned it. They made their way all the way across. But if you are playing a druid, you are stuck playing that druid. You are stuck playing that druid from 1 to 20 because you see that level 20 ability and you want it. You want to be able to wild shape into an adult dragon and stay that way. You know, there's nothing really stopping you. And it's sad, because there's so many other good aspects of the druids. But nobody really plays that, because it's not really that great. Next one. Fighter. Here we go. This one's going to be controversial. Are you ready? Are you ready? I think the fighter's great. I think the fighter is awesome, personally. Because the fighter is one of the most diverse. It's one of the most expressive classes in the first player's handbook that you can actually kind of do whatever you want. You want to be Fighter McFighterson with a fighter stick? Great. Be Fighter McFighterson with a fighting stick. You want to be that knight that's across the street that's telling you to stop because your party just stole something? Great. Be the knight that just told your party to stop because they just stole something. You know, you want to be the archer that sits down low into the ground and has his frickin' bow out. He's got an arrow notched and he's ready to fire at any moment. Be that guy. The fact of the matter is the fighter is so expansive. There is so many things that you can do with the fighter. And everyone calls him basic? Are you kidding me? The fighter, his 20th level ability is he gets a 3rd attack. Which means he attacks 4 times in a round. At level 20. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna smack, 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 action surge, do it again. Level 20 is actually where most of the classes break. And the thing with the fighter is it's one of the more balanced ones because of the fact that all it is an extra attack. You as the fighter, and this is the best argument for the fighter, You, as the fighter, get to choose how you initiate those attacks. You, as the fighter, get to decide how you burn your abilities. Whether you use Action Surge or Indomitable. You do stuff like that. You get the ability to do it on your own commands. You, as the player, get to choose. And everybody calls it basic. I don't understand it. It's like, oh, you're just a basic fighter. So? Basic fighters can be cool. Basic fighters can be good. And you want to know something real sad? You want to break just about any class, multi-class into fighter up to 3rd level. Correction, up to 5th, because at least then you get an extra attack unless you're playing a melee-based class. Seriously, you want to break it? Action Surge breaks it every time. Because action economy is so important in Dungeons & Dragons. If you've played a tactics game, you know action economy is so important. Because you have so many things that you need to do at once, and you have so many little times to do it. You can only attack once per turn. You can only use a bonus action once per turn. You only technically 2 actions and a movement action. And that movement action isn't really a movement action, it's just moving. You get 30 feet of movement. Pick a spot. You know, and if you're doing a lot of theater of the mind things, trust me, nobody's keeping track of how much feet you've got. But that's the thing, though, is everybody calls the fighter basic, but it's not. It's really not. The fighter is one of the more substantial characters to play. You have so many different aspects. And this video could be a whole rant on just fighters, but I've already been on this for about 5 minutes. We need to move on, because we're only a third of the way through this book. Next class, Monk. Easiest class to play in Dungeons & Dragons. 100% agree with Puff and Forest on this. Or not Puff and Forest. Who is it? EXP to level 3. I agree with Jacob on this. The fucking Monk is the easiest class to play, because it's literally just pop, 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 pop. Okay, I need to do that again. Pop, 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 pop. It's literally you're just throwing fists. Your archetypes let you do other stuff outside of that, but your basic abilities through level up is essentially how many times you can punch a dude, and whether or not you can make them stick, make them stunned, or stop them in their tracks. And if you're thinking I'm just talking about one ability, you know I'm wrong if you've played a monk. The thing about the monks is they are super easy to play. I recommend any first-time players to play either a fighter or a monk, depending on what kind of archetype they want to go down. Personally, I don't like the archetypes in the player's handbook, but I do like one that's in a different book later on that we will talk about when I get to it. So, monk. Super easy, super good. If you need an example, Beauregard from Critical Role is a really good example. Because, I'm sorry, when they did Mighty Nine versus Vox Machina, the only reason the Mighty Nine won is because of Beau. Fight me. Actually, don't, because I'm not a very good fighter. Next class. What do we get to talk about next? Whew. Oh! We get to talk about my favorite. Paladin. This is my favorite class of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition. Bar none. Bar none, it is my favorite class in the entire books. All of them. Does not matter. Favorite class. Especially in the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook gives you 3 archetypes as a Paladin, and they are all good. Vengeance lets you do a lot more in combat, and especially allows you to do a lot more damage. Oath of the Ancient Ones essentially allows you to become a Druid. A Druid Paladin! Yay! And then you essentially have a life domain for the frickin' Paladin, which is the Oath of Protection, I think. But all of them are actually fairly good. When you're playing a Paladin, it's really hard to decide which oath you go for. But let's talk about what we all really want to know about the Paladin. That smite. Oh, yeah, let's talk about the Smite. The Smite is the best part of the Paladin, bar none. It is your biggest damage dealer of the entire class. It is one of the best damage dealing classes of the entire game. And when a lot of people like to cross-class with this class, it is primarily for the Smite. They are cross-classing with it specifically for the Smite. They are not cross-classing for anything else. They are doing it for the Smite. And trust me, I know this because that's why I cross-classed Vivian in that old video. Go check it out. But the Paladin is one of my favorite classes to play because I've played 3 different characters, all from the same book. I have played an Oath of the Ancient Ones Paladin. I have played an Oath of Vengeance. I have played an Oath of Protection. I have played all 3 oaths in this book. I have made more Paladins in my life than I have any other class. And that's really sad to say, but it's the truth. Paladins fucking rock. These guys are some of the strongest classes in the game. The problem is a lot of people play them wrong, with the idea that you have to play lawful good prick. Which means that the guy who's constantly telling your party to stop because they just stole something is doing that for everything illegal. And that's just, you don't have to play them that way. I played a freaking lawful good Dragonborn Paladin of Bahamut. And it was great, because when anybody asked me, well, why are you doing it that way? Wouldn't your god be displeased? I simply looked at him and said, do you really think my god cares? Do you really think Bahamut cares? As far as he's concerned, I'm pushing his work. You know, I'm doing shit he needs me to do. You really think he's gonna care how I go about it? He's a god. He's not sweating my ass. And if I really piss him off, he'll just take my powers away. And honestly, every time I've told my DM that, they laugh, pat me on the back, and say, you know, you're right. Because it's like, look, just because I'm lawful good doesn't mean I have to follow every law of every state. You know, I don't go to a town and go, I need to find their police station so I know their laws. Fucking why? Your god doesn't need to know why. He doesn't need to know the rules of this state. He's given you a job to do, now go do it. He doesn't care how you get it done. Man, I love Paladins. They're so fun. And let's be honest, that Smite is like one of the best things about them. Like, there are videos out there that are like, you know, you use the Paladin Smite too much. Yeah? Of course we use it too much. It's the one feature of the Paladin that's consistent. On top of the other 2 features of the Paladin that's really consistent, like healing hands. Or lay on hands. Sorry. It's like... the Paladin is so good! Plus, its level 20 ability essentially lets you transform into whatever archetype you get at the end. It's like, okay, you're a Vengeance Paladin? Guess what? You transform into a large angelic creature of vengeance! It's like, that's freaking awesome! Are you kidding me? For those of you who are thinking to themselves, well, what about the Oathbreaker Paladin? I will talk about him when I get to the DMG. Which will take a minute. Because I want to talk about all the expansions first. I essentially want to do this in order of player stuff, then DM stuff. Next class. Ranger. Oh, my boy. They did you so dirty in this book. Ranger in the Player's Handbook is the worst class in the Player's Handbook. Ranger is the worst class in their Player's Handbook, and I say that 3 times specifically because it's the truth. Everybody who knows anything about Dungeons & Dragons, anybody who watches D&D content, you know as well as I do that the one class that gets shit on the most is the Ranger. The Ranger gets treated like crap, even though some people will flat out say there are good aspects of the Ranger, but nobody plays them. And the primary reason behind that is because the Ranger has essentially 3 other classes kind of mushed together. They are essentially a fighter, a rogue, and I want to say like a bard. Which, I think I'm wrong. I think it's a spellcaster. I think it's a wizard. So, fighter, rogue, wizard. You may as well just play a class. You may as well play a fighter who levels up into rogue and wizard. Just saying. You should just do it that way. Because it's no fun doing it any other way. Plus, and this is the saddest part, the Ranger is kind of... Okay, first of all, its abilities are bad. The Ranger is just bad. There's a lot of abilities that it gets that are just so situational. First of all, favorite enemy and favorite terrain. These 2 abilities require you to pick something before the session. Now, 9 times out of 10, you could just go, well, I'm going to go talk to my DM about it. But, you can go talk to your DM about it, but what happens when you're out of those areas? Well, first of all, it's no longer your favorite terrain. It is no longer your favorite enemy. So those features are essentially gone. They disappear. They may as well not even be on your character sheet, because they just... So you forget about it. You don't ever really use those abilities because you're like, well, it never comes up. And the DM's not keeping a note of, okay, this is the Ranger's favorite terrain, this is the Ranger's favorite enemy. And the reason why he's not keeping a note is because he's not specifically writing out the biomes of every location everyone's going to. So everybody just dislikes it for that. Because of what they're doing as players, you know? You know, so a lot of people just don't like Rangers. Personally, I think Rangers are fine. I love playing a Ranger. I think they're great. But the Player's Handbook did them so dirty because their archetypes are bad. You're either the Beastmaster who gets a pet who doesn't really do anything in combat, especially considering the pet takes its turn on your turn. Unless the DM specifically erratas it to where they're like, no, your pet gets his own initiative, which I do a lot, you're hardly ever using your animal companion. Or, you can be a really good archer. You can be really good at ranged combat, which is what you usually do. Fucking ridiculous too, because it's like, that's all I do? That's all I've got? Yeah, that's all you do. That's all you got. And it's so sad, because that's not what I'm supposed to be able to do. As a Ranger, I'm supposed to be able to track things. I'm supposed to be able to find things. But 9 times out of 10, that stuff doesn't come up, because either A, you forget, or B, your DM doesn't have that kind of thing prepared. And it's so upsetting, because it's like, as a Ranger, you should be like Aragorn. You should be able to discern enemies when you first see them. You should be able to start, you know, essentially wading into combat with no fear. You should be a fearless survivalist. And instead, you are nothing more than an amalgamation of other classes, specifically made with a bow. And that's sad. That really is sad. There's a lot of good archetypes out there for the Ranger, but none of them are in the Player's Handbook. Not one. I'm gonna move on so I don't end up sounding all whiny. Rogue. Here we go. Back into the top of things. Rogue is a really good class, but it's really good. Like, really, 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 really good. There are so many things about the Rogue that I could go into right now that I'm not going to, specifically because of the time. This video is already going pretty freaking long. But the Rogue is one of the best damage dealers in the book. Paladin's my favorite. Rogue is the best. when it comes to damaging in this book. No matter what, the rogue can outpace you in damage. And that is because of sneak attack. Sneak attack is one of the best abilities of the rogue. Being able to sneak in behind creatures and just stab them. And they do it really good. You know, being able to add, essentially, 2d6 on any attack at first level, pretty good. Especially if you're playing a rogue who actually knows what he's doing. Then there's the archetypes. Oh, the archetypes. You have the freaking assassin rogue, which is the one I usually go with, where it's just like, okay, I catch this guy by surprise, okay, I just crit. And critting literally means double damage. If you're a really good rogue and you're really smart about it, you're going to be critting a lot. Then you have the archetype that lets you cast spells. You know, I forgot the name of this one. Mostly because I haven't played it, but it's a really good archetype. Arcane Trickster. There we go. The Arcane Trickster literally gets a bunch of spells from the wizard spell list. And can literally, like, magic hand. You know, they can make their magic hand pickpockets. Undo locks. They literally can make their magic hand do things from a range from like 30 feet out. The Arcane Trickster is super good. And then you have the Thief. And the Thief is actually a lot better than I gave it credit for a long time ago. Because reading it, it's like, the Thief doesn't really do a lot. No, the Thief does a lot. The Thief is really good at being a thief. Like, really good. Like, I can steal it off your back and you not realize it good. And that is just... For those who have played Skyrim, it's the pickpocket. The guy who always crouches and pickpockets people. It's that guy. Oh, and the rogues are really good at it. And like I said, the rogues, they're going to outpace you. They are going to outpace you so fast in damage. Especially early on. Don't get me wrong. Wizards catch up. Spellcasters catch up. But the rogue outpaces you early on. Speaking of spellcasters, let's get into them. Sorcerer. This one's a fun one. The Sorcerer is one of the better spellcasters in the player's handbook. Personally. I think the Sorcerer is one of the best, specifically because of its metamagic. The ability to essentially say, okay, I'm going to just double my spell. I'm going to just quicken it so I can make essentially 2 spell attacks a turn. Being able to make the spell bigger and do more damage. Essentially increasing the range of the spell. The metamagic literally gives you so many options to essentially make your character a utility caster. You can essentially cast any kind of attack-based spell and throw it out and essentially do whatever you want with it. You can make it blow up, make it bigger. You can make it go farther. Like I said, you can make it faster. You know, I've seen some people who've taken the War Cleric, or not War Cleric, but the Warcaster feat, just so they can cast 2 spells a turn, 2 leveled spells, and literally just throw 2 fireballs out. Because they can do that. Because it's like, okay, first metamagic, I'm going to fireball, duplicate it, make 2 of them, and then on my bonus action, throw another one. Because I'm going to quicken it. I've seen it, and it's really cool to watch. Especially when you get a sorcerer who knows what they're doing. Because when they get going fast. And that fast just keeps going, and it just snowballs. The only way to beat a sorcerer of a higher level is to make them burn through their metamagic super fast. You can make them burn through their metamagic, you're good. Next one, don't even need the book for this, Warlock. The Warlock's okay. The Warlock's fine. The problem with the Warlock is that the Warlock only has 2 archetypes. Actually, it has 3. That should go to show the idea of this. One of them's very, very forgetful. One you hardly ever use, which is the Pact of the Fiend. And then there's the one pact that everybody goes with when it comes to Player's Handbook. Pact of the Great One. You know it, I know it, everybody goes with the Pact of the Great One when it comes to the first book. When it comes to the Player's Handbook and making a character, that's what we go with. We go with the Great Old One. Just because, Cthulhu. And personally, I think Warlock is just, in terms of casters, it's one of the most boring. Druid is the most boring, but Warlock is up there. It's pretty freaking close. Personally, the only good thing for me about the Warlock is that you get your spells back on a short rest. Which means the Warlock's going to be throwing out a lot of damage, but needing a lot of rest along the way. Because they only get so many spells. They only get like 2 spell slots throughout the entire thing, and then they eventually level up to 3. It's insane. Especially considering they get a lot of good spells. But they do what they do with what they can while they have it. Finally, we get to my favorite spellcaster of the entire set. Wizard. The Wizard is the utility caster. This is what a lot of people like to call the Wizard toolbox. Primarily because Wizards essentially can do a lot in a very short amount of time. The biggest issue with Wizards primarily is the fact that they have so many spells that they get cluttered. That when they're in combat, they forget which spell to use the most of. And they just stick with spells like Fireball and Firebolt. I mean, it works. You get spells like Identify, Detect Magic, Detect Traps. You get so many spells. In fact, most of the Player Handbook spells is specific to the Wizard. Other classes get them, but 9 times out of 10, the Wizard also gets them. There's only a couple that the Wizard doesn't get, and they're cantrips. When I get to the spellcasting section, I will talk about that later. But the Wizard's the utility box. You want to play a Pyrokinesis or a Pyromaniac? Go for it. You can play a Pyro Wizard. You want to play a Wizard who can tell time and can do it really good? Play the Chronomage. Or not Chronomage. Which one is it? I think it's like Prophecies or something. I have to look this one up. There are so many archetypes for the Wizard. Divination. There it is. Here, I'll just read off the freaking schools and you will be so confused. Because I know you'll be so confused. There's the School of Abjuration, School of Divination, Conjuration, Enchantment, Evocation, Illusion, Necromancy, Transmutation. They have the most archetypes in the entire book. There's only one downside to the Wizard. Their hit points. There is a reason why the meme of the Wizard dies to a d4 of anything is a factor. The Wizard in the Player's Handbook is a d6. Here's a little story about advanced Dungeons & Dragons. In old school AD&D, Wizards got one spell with one slot and a d4, so a 4-sided dice for their hit points. The reason why it's a meme is because they only had 4 hit points. Which meant, 9 times out of 10, if you were really unlucky and you rolled a 1, anybody who sneezed on you, you died. There's a reason why it's a meme. There's a reason why it's a joke. Is because it actually happened a lot. I remember a campaign that I played in. I played a Wizard. I played a wizard in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I got 1 spell, I had 1 slot, and I had a D4 hit points. I had 3 hit points. Combat 1, turn 1, the frickin' DM nailed me with a dagger and killed me. Ow. There's a reason why it's a joke, and it's the worst joke there is when it comes to D&D, next to the bard seducing everything. But, at the moment, we're already sitting at 1 hour and 5 minutes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this up into 2 parts. This was the character creation and the character races and classes review. Next time we're going to get into the items, the spells, and the backgrounds. And with that, I'm going to get on out of here. You guys have a fantastic day. As always, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good jazz. Honestly, at this point, I'm going to drop that from this point forward, because honestly, it's not working. And thank you for joining me in Kain's Corner. Remember, guys, make sure your human moments are always natural. Thanks, guys.